and Shoulders, the one dandruff shampoo that really works. Happy hair, happy hair, happy, 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 happy hair. Now, Head and Shoulders gives you happy hair. Clean, fresh, alive, out from under the dandruff problem. Your hair will be clean, really clean, because Head and Shoulders is the most effective dandruff shampoo you can buy. And Head and Shoulders does it in a happy way. Happy? You've never had it so happy till you've used Head and Shoulders, the shampoo that has everything. Effective dandruff control with just regular shampooing, and the clean, fresh, alive feeling you've always wanted. Head and Shoulders gives you the look you've always looked for. Happy hair, happy hair, happy, 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 happy hair. Happy hair? Sure, with Head and Shoulders, the one dandruff shampoo that really works. Shoulders gives you happy hair. Clean, fresh, alive, out from under the dandruff problem. Your hair will be clean, really clean, because Head and Shoulders is the most effective dandruff shampoo you can buy. And Head and Shoulders does it in a happy way. Happy? You've never had it so happy till you've used Head and Shoulders, the shampoo that has everything. Effective dandruff control with just regular shampooing, and the clean, fresh, alive feeling you've always wanted. Head and Shoulders gives you the look you've always looked for. Happy hair, happy hair, happy, 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 happy hair. Happy hair? Sure, with Head and Shoulders, the one dandruff shampoo that really works. Shoulders gives you happy hair. Clean, fresh, alive, out from under the dandruff problem. Your hair will be clean, really clean, because Head and Shoulders...
Are you on Medicare? If so, you'll want to hear this. Devoted Health's Medicare Advantage plans are...
Something sure and daring about this girl. Beneath that beautiful hair, confidence in basic black. Her secret, rinse away, dandruff shampoo, and rinse. The shampoo, luxurious necessity for clean, flake-free hair. The rinse, medicated for continuing dandruff protection you can count on, shampoo to shampoo. Leaves your hair tangle-free, ready for anything. Rinse away, shampoo, and rinse. Something sure and daring about this girl. Beneath that beautiful hair, confidence in basic black. Her secret, rinse away, dandruff shampoo, and rinse. The shampoo, luxurious necessity for clean, flake-free hair. The rinse, medicated for continuing dandruff protection you can count on, shampoo to shampoo. Leaves your hair tangle-free, ready for anything. Rinse away, shampoo, and rinse. Something sure and daring about this girl. Beneath that beautiful hair, confidence in basic black. Her secret, rinse away, dandruff shampoo, and rinse. The shampoo, luxurious necessity for clean, flake-free hair. The rinse, medicated for continuing dandruff protection you can count on, shampoo to shampoo. Leaves your hair tangle-free, ready for anything. Rinse away, shampoo, and rinse. Something sure and daring about this girl. Beneath that beautiful hair, confidence in basic black. Her secret, rinse away, dandruff shampoo, and rinse. The shampoo, luxurious necessity for clean, flake-free hair. The rinse, medicated for continuing dandruff protection you can count on, shampoo to shampoo. Leaves your hair tangle-free, ready for anything. Rinse away, shampoo, and rinse. Something sure and daring about this girl. Beneath that beautiful hair, confidence in basic black. Her secret, rinse away, dandruff shampoo, and rinse. The shampoo, luxurious necessity for clean, flake-free hair. The rinse, medicated for continuing dandruff protection you can count on. Shampoo to shampoo. Leaves your hair tangle-free, ready for anything. Rinse away. Shampoo and rinse. Something sure and daring about this girl. Beneath that beautiful hair, confidence in basic black. Her secret, rinse away, dandruff shampoo, and rinse. The shampoo, luxurious necessity for clean, flake-free hair. The rinse, medicated for continuing dandruff protection you can count on. Shampoo to shampoo.
$426 billion.
Levi, narrated by Henry Schrader. Introduction. Behind the veil of all the hieratic and mystical allegories of ancient doctrines, behind the darkness and strange ordeals of all initiations, in the ruins of Nineveh or Thebes, on the crumbling stones of old temples, and on the blackened visage of the Assyrian or Egyptian Sphinx, in the monstrous or marvelous paintings which interpret to the faithful of India the inspired pages of the Vedas, in the cryptic emblems of our old books on alchemy, in the ceremonies practiced at reception by all secret societies, there are found indications of a doctrine which is everywhere the same and everywhere carefully concealed. Occult philosophy seems to have been the nurse or godmother of all intellectual forces, the key of all divine obscurities, and the absolute queen of society in those ages when it was reserved exclusively for the education of priests and of kings. It reigned in Persia with the Magi, who perished in the end, as perish all masters of the world because they abused their power. It endowed India with the most wonderful traditions, and with it an incredible wealth of poesy, grace, and terror in its emblems. It civilized Greece to the music of the lyre of Orpheus. It concealed the principles of all sciences, all progress of the human mind, in the daring calculations of Pythagoras. Fable abounded in its miracles, and history, attempting to estimate this unknown power, became confused with fable. It undermined or consolidated empires by its oracles, caused tyrants to tremble on their thrones, and governed all minds, either by curiosity or by fear. For this science, said the crowd, there is nothing impossible. It commands the elements, knows the language of the stars, and directs the planetary courses. When it speaks, the moon falls blood red from heaven. The dead rise in their graves and mutter ominous words as the night wind blows through their skulls. Mistress of love or of hate, occult science can dispense paradise or hell at its pleasure to human hearts. It disposes of all forms and confers beauty or ugliness. With the wand of Circe, it changes men into brutes and animals alternately into men. It disposes even of life and death, can confer wealth on its adepts by the transmutation of metals, and immortality by its quintessence or elixir, compounded of gold and light. Such was magic from Zoroaster to Manes, from Orpheus to Apollonius of Tyana. When positive Christianity, victorious at length over the brilliant dreams and titanic aspirations of the Alexandrian school, dared to launch its anathemas publicly against this philosophy, and thus forced it to become more occult and mysterious than ever. Moreover, strange and alarming rumors began to circulate concerning initiates or adepts. They were surrounded everywhere by an ominous influence, and they destroyed or distracted those who allowed themselves to be beguiled by their honeyed eloquence or by the sorcery of their learning. The women whom they loved became striges, and their children vanished at nocturnal meetings, while men whispered shudderingly and in secret of blood-stained orgies and abominable banquets. Bones had been found in the crypts of ancient temples, shrieks had been heard in the night. Harvests withered and herds sickened when the magician passed by. Diseases which defied medical skill appeared at times in the world, and always, it was said, beneath the envenomed glance of the adepts. At length a universal cry of execration went up against magic. The mere name became a crime, and the common hatred was formulated in this sentence: "Magicians to the flames," as it was shouted some centuries earlier, "to the lions with the Christians." Now the multitude never conspires except against real powers. It does not know what is true, but it has the instinct of what is strong. It remained for the 18th century to deride both Christians and magic, while infatuated with the disquisitions of Rousseau and the illusions of Cagliostro. Science, notwithstanding, is at the basis of magic, as at the root of Christianity there is love. And in the gospel symbols we find the Word incarnate adored in his cradle by 3 magi, led thither by a star, the triad and the sign of the microcosm, and receiving their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, a second mysterious triplicity, under which emblem the highest secrets of the Kabbalah are allegorically contained. Christianity owes, therefore, no hatred to magic, but human ignorance has ever stood in fear of the unknown. The science was driven into hiding to escape the impassioned assaults of blind desire. It clothed itself with new hieroglyphics, falsified its intentions, denied its hopes. Then it was that the jargon of alchemy was created, an impenetrable illusion for the vulgar in their greed of gold, a living language only for the true disciple of Hermes. Extraordinary fact. Among the sacred records of the Christians, there are 2 texts which the infallible Church makes no claim to understand and has never attempted to expound. These are the prophecy of Ezekiel and the Apocalypse, 2 Kabbalistic keys reserved assuredly in heaven for the commentaries of Magi and Kings, books sealed as with 7 seals for faithful believers, yet perfectly plain to an initiated infidel of the occult sciences. There is also another work, but although it is popular in a sense and may be found everywhere, this is of all most occult and unknown, because it is the key of the rest. It is in public evidence without being known to the public. No one suspects its existence, and no one dreams of seeking it where it actually is. This book, which may be older than that of Enoch, has never been translated, but is still preserved unmutilated in primeval characters on detached leaves, like the tablets of the ancients. The fact has eluded notice, though a distinguished scholar has revealed, not indeed its secret, but its antiquity and singular preservation. Another scholar, but of a mind more fantastic than judicious, passed 30 years in the study of this masterpiece, and has merely suspected its plenary importance. It is, in truth, a monumental and extraordinary work, strong and simple as the architecture of the pyramids, and consequently enduring like those, a book which is the summary of all sciences, which can resolve all problems by its infinite combinations, which speaks by evoking thought, is the inspirer and moderator of all possible conceptions, and the masterpiece, perhaps, of the human mind. It is to be counted unquestionably among the very great gifts bequeathed to us by antiquity. It is a universal key, the name of which has been explained and comprehended only by the learned William Postel. It is a unique test, whereof the initial characters alone plunged into ecstasy the devout spirit of St. Martin, and might have restored reason to the sublime and unfortunate Swedenborg. We shall recur to this book later on, for its mathematical and precise explanation will be the complement and crown of our conscientious undertaking. The original alliance between Christianity and the science of the Magi, once demonstrated fully, will be a discovery of no second-rate importance, and we do not doubt that the serious study of magic and the Kabbalah will lead earnest minds to a reconciliation of science and dogma, of reason and faith, heretofore regarded as impossible. We have said that the Church, whose special office is the custody of the keys, does not pretend to possess those of the Apocalypse or of Ezekiel. In the opinion of Christians, the scientific and magical clavicles of Solomon are lost, which, notwithstanding, it is certain that in the domain of intelligence ruled by the Word, nothing that has been written can perish. Whatsoever men cease to understand exists for them no longer, at least in the order of the Word, and it passes then into the domain of enigma and mystery. Furthermore, the antipathy and even open war of the official church against all that belongs to the realm of magic, which is a kind of personal and emancipated priesthood, is allied with necessary and even with inherent causes in the social and hierarchic constitution of Christian sacerdotalism. The church ignores magic, for she must either ignore it or perish, as we shall prove later on. Yet she does not recognize the less that her mysterious founder was saluted in his cradle by 3 magi, that is to say, by the hieratic ambassadors of the 3 parts of the known world and the 3 analogical worlds of occult philosophy. In the school of Alexandria, magic and Christianity almost joined hands under the auspices of Ammonius Saccas and of Plato. The doctrine of Hermes is found almost in its entirety in the writings attributed to Dionysius the Areopagite. Synesius outlined the plan of a treatise on dreams, which was annotated subsequently by Cardon, and composed hymns that might have served for the liturgy of the Church of Swedenborg, could a Church of the Illuminated possess a liturgy. With this period of fiery abstractions and impassioned warfare of words, there must be connected also the philosophic reign of Julian, called the Apostate because in his youth he made unwilling profession of Christianity. Everyone is aware that Julian had the misfortune to be a hero out of season of Plutarch, and that he was, if one may say so, the Don Quixote of Roman chivalry. But what most people do not know is that he was one of the illuminated and an initiate of the First Order, that he believed in the unity of God and in the universal doctrine of the Trinity, that, in a word, he regretted nothing of the old world, but its magnificent symbols and its too gracious images. Julian was not a pagan. He was a Gnostic, allured by the allegories of Greek polytheism, who had the misfortune to find the name of Jesus Christ less sonorous than that of Orpheus. The emperor paid in his person for the academical tastes of the philosopher and rhetorician, and Alter affording himself the spectacle and satisfaction of expiring like Epaminondas with the periods of Cato. He had, in public opinion, by this time fully Christianized, but anathemas for his funeral oration and a scornful epithet for his ultimate memorial. Let us pass over the petty minds and small matters of the Boss Empire and proceed to the Middle Ages. Stay, take this book. Glance at the 7th page, and then seat yourself on the mantle which I am spreading, and let each of us cover our eyes with one of its corners. Your head swims, does it not, and the earth seems to fly beneath your feet. Hold tightly and do not look right or left. The vertigo ceases. We are here. Stand up and open your eyes, but take care before all things to make no Christian sign and to pronounce no Christian words. We are in a landscape of Salvator Rosa, a troubled wilderness which seems resting after a storm. There's no moon in the sky, but you can distinguish little stars gleaming in the brushwood, and may hear about you the slow flight of great birds, which seem to whisper strange oracles as they pass. Let us approach silently that crossroad among the rocks. A harsh, funereal trumpet winds suddenly, and black torches flare up on every side. A tumultuous throng is surging round a vacant throne. All watch and wait. Suddenly they cast themselves on the ground. A goat-headed prince bounds forward among them. He ascends the throne, turns, and assuming a stooping posture, presents to the assembly a human face, which everyone comes forward to salute and to kiss, their black taper in their hands. With a hoarse laugh he recovers an upright position, and then distributes gold, secret instructions, occult medicines, and poisons to his faithful bondsmen. Meanwhile, fires are lighted of fern and alder, piled up with human bones and the fat of executed criminals. Druidesses, crowned with wild parsley and vervain, immolate unbaptized children with golden knives and prepare horrible love feasts. Tables are spread, masked men seat themselves by half-nude females, and a bacchanalian orgy begins. There is nothing wanting but salt, the symbol of wisdom and immortality. Wine flows in streams, leaving stains like blood. Obscene advances and abandoned caresses begin. A little while, and the whole assembly is beside itself with drink and wantonness, with crimes and singing. They rise, a disordered throng, and form infernal dances. Then come all the legendary monsters, all phantoms of nightmare. Enormous toads play inverted flutes and thump with paws on flanks. Limping scarabaei mingle in the dance. Crabs play the castanets. Crocodiles beat time on their scales. Elephants and mammoths appear habited like cupids and footed in the ring. Finally, the giddy circles break up and scatter on all sides. Every yelling dancer drags away a disheveled female. Lamps and candles formed of human fat go out smoking in the darkness. Cries are heard here and there, mingled with peals of laughter, blasphemies and rattlings in the throat. Come, rouse yourself. Do not make the sign of the cross. See, I have brought you home. You are in your bed, not a little worn out, possibly a trifle shattered by your night's journey and its orgy, but you have beheld that of which everyone talks without knowledge. You have been initiated into secrets no less terrible than the grotto of Tryphonius. You have been present at the Sabbath. It remains for you now to preserve your wits, to have a wholesome dread of the law, and to keep at a respectful distance from the church and her faggots. Would you care, as a change, to behold something less fantastic, more real, and also more truly terrible? You shall assist at the execution of Jacques de Molay and his accomplices or his brethren in martyrdom. Be not misled, however. Confuse not the guilty and the innocent. Did the Templars really adore the Baphomet? Did they offer a shameful salutation to the buttocks of the goat of Mendes? What was actually this secret and potent association which imperiled both church and state, and was thus destroyed unheard? Judge nothing lightly. They are guilty of a great crime. They have exposed to profane eyes the sanctuary of antique initiation. They have gathered again and have shared the fruits of the tree of knowledge, so that they might become masters of the world. The judgment pronounced against them is higher and far older than the tribunal of pope or king. On that day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die, said God himself, as we read in the book of Genesis. What then is taking place in the world, and why do priests and potentates tremble? What secret power threatens tiaras and crowns? A few bedlamites are roaming from land to land, concealing, as they say, the philosophical stone under their ragged vesture. They can change earth into gold, and they are without food or lodging. Their brows are encircled by an aureole of glory and by a shadow of ignominy. One has discovered the universal science and goes vainly seeking death to escape the agonies of his triumph. He is the Majorcan Raymond Lully. Another heals imaginary diseases by fantastic remedies, belying beforehand that proverb which enforces the futility of a cautery on a wooden leg. He is the marvelous Paracelsus, always drunk and always lucid, like the heroes of Rabelais. Here is William Postal writing naively to the fathers of the Council of Trent, proclaiming that he has discovered the absolute doctrine, hidden from the foundation of the world, and is longing to share it with them. The council heeds not the maniac, does not vouchsafe to condemn him, but proceeds to examine the grave questions of efficacious grace and sufficing grace. He whom we behold perishing poor and abandoned is Cornelius Agrippa, less of a magician than any, though the vulgar persist in regarding him as a more potent sorcerer than all, because he was sometimes a cynic and mystifier. What secret do these men bear with them to their tomb? Why are they wondered at without being understood? Why are they condemned unheard? Why are they initiates of those terrific secret sciences of which the church and society are afraid? Why are they acquainted with things of which others know nothing? Why do they conceal what all men burn to know? Why are they invested with a dread and unknown power? The occult sciences, magic. These words will reveal all and give food for further thought. De omni re scribili et quibusdem aliis. But what, as a fact, was this magic? What was the power of these men who were at once so proud and so persecuted? If they were really strong, why did they not overcome their enemies? But if they were impotent and foolish, why did people honor them by fearing them? Does magic exist? Is there an occult knowledge which is in truth a power and works wonders comparable to the miracles of authorized religions? To these two palmary questions we make answer by an affirmation and a book. The book shall justify the affirmation, and the affirmation is this: there was and there still is a potent and real magic. All that is said of it in legend is true after a certain manner, yet contrary to the common course of popular exaggeration, it falls below the truth. There is indeed a formidable secret, the revelation of which has once already transformed the world, as testified in Egyptian religious tradition, summarized symbolically by Moses at the beginning of Genesis. This secret constitutes the fatal science of good and evil, and the consequence of its revelation is death. Moses depicts it under the figure of a tree which stands in the midst of the terrestrial paradise, is in proximity to the tree of life, and is joined at the root thereto. At the foot of this tree is the source of the four mysterious rivers. It is guarded by the sword of fire and by the four symbolical forms of the biblical Sphinx, the cherubim of Ezekiel. Here I must pause, and I fear that already I have said too much. I testify and find that there is one sole, universal, and imperishable dogma, strong as supreme reason, simple, like all that is great, intelligible, like all that is universally and absolutely true, and this dogma is the parent of all others. There is also a science which confers on man powers apparently superhuman. They are enumerated thus in a Hebrew manuscript of the 16th century. Hereinafter follow the powers and privileges of him who holds in his right hand the clavicles of Solomon, and in his left the branch of the blossoming almond. Aleph. He beholds God face to face without dying, and converses familiarly with the 7 genii who command the entire celestial army. Beth. He is above all griefs and all fears. Gimel. He reigns with all heaven and is served by all hell. Daleth. He rules his own health and life and can influence equally those of others. He. He can neither be surprised by misfortune nor overwhelmed by disasters, nor can he be conquered by his enemies. Vow. He knows the reason of the past, present, and future. Zane. He possesses the secret of the resurrection of the dead and the key of immortality. Such are the 7 chief privileges, and those which rank next are these. Cheth, to find the philosophical stone. Teth, to possess the universal medicine. Iod, to know the laws of perpetual motion and to prove the quadrature of the circle. Kath, to change into gold not only all metals but also the earth itself, and even the refuse of the earth. Lamed, to subdue the most ferocious animals and have power to pronounce those words which paralyze and charm serpents. Mem, to have the ars notoria which gives the universal science. Nun, to speak learnedly on all subjects without preparation and without study. These finally are the 7 least powers of the Magus. Samek, to know at a glance the deep things of the souls of men and the mysteries of the hearts of women. Ayin, to force nature to make him free at his pleasure. Pe, to foresee all future events which do not depend on a superior free will or an undiscernible cause. Sade, to give at once and to all the most efficacious consolations and the most wholesome counsels. Kof, to triumph over adversities. Resh, to conquer love and hate. Shin, to have the secret of wealth, to be always its master and never its slave, to enjoy even poverty and never become abject or miserable. Tau, let us add to these 3 septenaries that the wise man rules the elements, stills tempests, cures the diseased by his touch, and raises the dead. But certain things have been sealed by Solomon with his triple seal. It is enough that the initiates know, as for others, whether they deride, doubt, or believe, whether they threaten or fear, what matters it to science or to us? Such actually are the issues of occult philosophy, and we are in a position to meet the charge of insanity or the suspicion of imposture when we affirm that these privileges are real. To demonstrate this is the sole end of our work on occult philosophy. The philosophical stone, the universal medicine, the transmutation of metals, the quadrature of the circle, and the secret of perpetual motion are neither mystifications of science nor dreams of delusion. They are terms which must be understood in their proper sense. They formulate the varied applications of one and the same secret, the several aspects of a single operation which is defined in a more comprehensive manner under the name of the great work. Furthermore, there exists in nature a force which is immeasurably more powerful than steam, and a single man who is able to adapt and direct it might change thereby the face of the whole world. This force was known to the ancients. It consists in a universal agent having equilibrium for its supreme law, while its direction is concerned immediately with the great arcanum of transcendental magic. By the direction of this agent, it is possible to modify the very order of the seasons, to produce at night the phenomena of day, to correspond instantaneously between one extremity of earth and the other, to see, like Apollonius, what is taking place on the other side of the world, to heal or injure at a distance, to give speech a universal success and reverberation. This agent, which barely manifests under the uncertain methods of Mesmer's followers, is precisely that which the adepts of the Middle Ages denominated the first matter of the great work. The Gnostics represented it as the fiery body of the Holy Spirit. It was the object of adoration in the secret rites of the Sabbath and the Temple, under the hieroglyphic figure of Baphomet or the androgyny of Mendes. All of this will be proved. Here then are the secrets of occult philosophy, and such is magic in history. Let us glance at it now as it appears in its books and its acts, in its initiations and its rites. The key of all magical allegories is found in the tablets which we have mentioned, and these tablets we regard as the work of Hermes. About this book, which may be called the keystone of the whole edifice of occult science, are grouped innumerable legends that are either its partial translation or its commentary reproduced perpetually under 1,000 varied forms. Sometimes the ingenious fables combine harmoniously into a great epic which characterizes an epoch, though how or why is not clear to the uninitiated. Thus, the fabulous history of the Golden Fleece resumes and also veils the hermetic and magical doctrines of Orpheus, and if we recur only to the mysterious poetry of Greece, it is because the sanctuaries of Egypt and India to some extent dismay us by their resources, leaving our choice embarrassed in the midst of such abundant wealth. We are eager, moreover, to reach the Thebaid at once, that dread synthesis of all doctrine, past, present, and future. that, so to speak, infinite fable which reaches, like the deity of Orpheus, to either end of the cycle of human life. Extraordinary fact. The 7 gates of Thebes, attacked and defended by 7 chiefs who have sworn upon the blood of victims, possess the same significance as the 7 seals of the sacred book, interpreted by 7 genii and assailed by a monster with 7 heads, after being opened by a lamb which liveth and was dead in the allegorical work of St. John. The mysterious origin of Oedipus, found hanging on the tree of Cithaeron like a bleeding fruit, recalls the symbols of Moses and the narratives of Genesis. He makes war upon his father, whom he slays without knowing. Tremendous prophecy of the blind emancipation of reason apart from science. Thereafter he meets with the Sphinx, that symbol of symbols, the eternal enigma of the vulgar, the granite pedestal of the sciences of the sages, the voracious and silent monster whose unchanging form expresses the one dogma of the great universal mystery. How is the tetrad changed into the duad and explained by the triad? In more common but more emblematic terms, what is that animal which in the morning has 4 feet, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Philosophically speaking, how does the doctrine of elementary forces produce the dualism of Zoroaster? Well, it is summarized by the triad of Pythagoras and Plato. What is the ultimate reason of allegories and numbers, the final message of all symbolisms? Oedipus replies with a simple and terrible word which destroys the Sphinx and makes the diviner king of Thebes. The answer to the enigma is man. Unfortunate, he has seen too much, and yet through a clouded glass. A little while, and he will expiate his ominous and imperfect clairvoyance by a voluntary blindness, and then vanish in the midst of a storm like all civilizations, which, each in its own day, shall divine an answer to the riddle of the Sphinx without grasping its whole import and mystery. Everything is symbolical and transcendental in this titanic epic of human destinies. The 2 antagonistic brothers formulate the second part of the grand mystery, completely divinely by the sacrifice of Antigone. There follows the last war. The brethren slay one another. Capaneus is destroyed by the lightning which he defies. Amphiaraus is swallowed by the earth. And all these are so many allegories which, by their truth and their grandeur, astonish those who can penetrate their triple hieratic sense. Aeschylus, annotated by Ballanche, gives only a weak notion concerning them, whatever the primeval sublimities of the Greek poet or the ingenuities of the French critic. The secret book of antique initiation was not unknown to Homer, who outlines its plan and chief figures on the shield of Achilles, with minute precision. But the gracious Homeric fictions replace too soon in popular memory the simple and abstract truths of primeval revelation. Humanity clung to the form and allowed the idea to be forgotten. Signs lost power in their multiplication. Magic became corrupted also at this period, and degenerated with the sorcerers of Thessaly into the most profane enchantments. The crime of Oedipus brought forth its deadly fruits, and the science of good and evil erected evil into a sacrilegious divinity. Men, weary of the light, took refuge in the shadow of bodily substance. The dream of that void which is filled by God seemed in their eyes to be greater than God himself, and thus hell was created. When in the course of this work we make use of the consecrated terms God, heaven, and hell, let it be understood once and for all that our meaning is as far removed from that which the profane attach to them as initiation is remote from the vulgar thought. God for us is the Azoth of the sages, the efficient and final principle of the great work. Returning to the fable of Oedipus, the crime of the king of Thebes was that he failed to understand the Sphinx that he destroyed, the scourge of Thebes, without being pure enough to complete the expiation in the name of his people. The plague, in consequence, avenged speedily the death of the monster, and the king of Thebes, forced to abdicate, sacrificed himself to the terrible manes of the Sphinx, more alive and voracious than ever when it had passed from the domain of form into that of idea. Oedipus divined what was man, and he put out his own eyes because he did not see what was God. He divulged half of the great arcanum, and to save his people it was necessary for him to bear the remaining half of the terrible secret into exile and the grave. After the colossal fable of Oedipus, we find the gracious poem of Psyche, which was certainly not invented by Apuleius. The great magical arcanum reappears here under the figure of a mysterious union between a god and a weak mortal, abandoned alone and naked on a rock. Psyche must remain in ignorance of the secret of her ideal royalty, and if she behold her husband, she must lose him. Here Apuleius commentates and interprets Moses, but did not the Elohim of Israel and the gods of Apuleius both issue from the sanctuaries of Memphis and Thebes? Psyche is the sister of Eve, or rather she is Eve spiritualized. Both desire to know and lose innocence for the honor of the ordeal. Both deserve to go down into hell, one to bring back the antique box of Pandora, the other to find and to crush the head of the old serpent, who is the symbol of time and of evil. Both are guilty of the crime which must be expiated by the Prometheus of ancient days and the Lucifer of the Christian legend, the one delivered by Hercules and the other overcome by the Savior. The great magical secret is therefore the lamp and dagger of Psyche, the apple of Eve, the sacred fire of Prometheus, the burning scepter of Lucifer, but it is also the holy cross of the Redeemer. To be acquainted with it sufficiently for its abuse or divulgation is to deserve all sufferings. To know as one should alone know it, namely to make use of and conceal it, is to be master of the absolute. A single word comprehends all things, and this word consists of 4 letters. It is the tetragram of the Hebrews, the azot of the alchemists, the thought of the Bohemians, or the tarot of the Kabbalists. This word, expressed after so many manners, means God for the profane, man for the philosophers, and imparts to the adepts the final term of human sciences and the key of divine power. But he only can use it who understands the necessity of never revealing it. Had Oedipus, instead of killing the Sphinx, overcome it, harnessed it to his chariot, and thus entered Thebes, he would have been king without incest, without misfortunes, and without exile. Had Psyche, by meekness and affection, persuaded Love to reveal himself, she would never have lost Love. Now, love is one of the most mythological images of the great secret and the great agent, because it postulates at once an action and a passion, a void and a plenitude, a shaft and a wound. The initiates will understand me, and on account of the profane I must not speak more clearly. After the marvelous golden ass of Apuleius, we find no more magical epics. Science, conquered in Alexandria by the fanaticism of the murders of Hypatia, became Christian, or rather concealed itself under Christian veils with Ammonius, Synesius, and the pseudonymous author of the books of Dionysius the Areopagite. In such times it was necessary to exonerate miracles under the pretense of superstition and science by an unintelligible language. Hieroglyphic writing was revived. Pantocles and characters were invented to summarize an entire doctrine by a sign, a whole sequence of tendencies and revelations in a word. What was the end of the aspirants to knowledge? They sought the secret of the great work, the philosophical stone, the perpetual motion, the quadrature of the circle, the universal medicine, formulae which often saved them from persecution and hatred by causing them to be taxed with madness, but all signifying one of the phases of the great magical secret, as we shall show later on. This absence of epics continues till our Romance of the Rose, but the rose symbol, which expresses also the mysterious and magical sense of Dante's poem, is borrowed from the transcendent Kabbalah, and it is time that we should have recourse to this vast and hidden source of universal philosophy. The Bible, with all its allegories, gives expression to the religious knowledge of the Hebrews only in an incomplete and veiled manner. The book which we have mentioned, the hieratic characters of which we shall explain subsequently, that book which William Postel names the Genesis of Enoch, existed certainly before Moses and the prophets, whose doctrine, fundamentally identical with that of the ancient Egyptians, had also its exotericism and its veils. When Moses spoke to the people, says the sacred book allegorically, he placed a veil over his face, and he removed it when communing with God. This accounts for the alleged biblical absurdities which so exercise the satirical powers of Voltaire. The books were written only as memorials of tradition and in symbols that were unintelligible to the profane. The Pentateuch and the poems of the prophets were, moreover, elementary works, alike in doctrine, ethics, and liturgy. The true secret and traditional philosophy was not committed to writing until a later period and under veils even less transparent. Thus arose a second and unknown Bible, or rather one which was not comprehended by Christians, a storehouse, so they say, of monstrous absurdities. For in this case, believers, involved by the same ignorance, speak the language of skeptics, but a monument, as we affirm, which comprises all that philosophical and religious genius has ever accomplished or imagined in the sublime order, a treasure encompassed by thorns, a diamond concealed in a rude and opaque stone. Our readers will have guessed already that we refer to the Talmud. How strange is the destiny of the Jews, those scapegoats, martyrs, and saviors of the world, a people full of vitality, a bold and hardy race, which persecutions have preserved intact, because it has not yet accomplished its mission. Do not our apostolical traditions declare that after the decline of faith among the Gentiles, salvation shall again come forth out of the house of Jacob, and that then the crucified Jew, who is adored by the Christians, will give the empire of the world into the hands of God his Father? On penetrating into the sanctuary of the Kabbalah, one is seized with admiration in the presence of a doctrine so logical, so simple, and at the same time so absolute. The essential union of ideas and signs, the consecration of the most fundamental realities by primitive characters, the trinity of words, letters, and numbers, a philosophy simple as the alphabet, profound and infinite as the word, theorems more complete and luminous than those of Pythagoras, a theology which may be summed up on the fingers, an infinite which can be held in the hollow of an infant's hand, 10 figures and 22 letters, a triangle, a square, and a circle. Such are the elements of the Kabbalah. Such also are the component principles of the written word, reflection of that spoken word which created the world. All truly dogmatic religions have issued from the Kabbalah and return therein. Whatsoever is grand or scientific in the religious dreams of the illuminated, of Jacob Boehme, Swedenborg, St. Martin, and the rest, is borrowed from the Kabbalah. All Masonic associations owe to it their secrets and their symbols. The Kabbalah alone consecrates the alliance of universal reason and the divine word. It establishes, by the counterpoise of two forces in apparent opposition, the eternal balance of being. It alone reconciles reason with faith, power with liberty, science with mystery. It has the keys of the present, past, and future. To become initiated into the Kabbalah, it is insufficient to read and to meditate upon the writings of Reuchlin, Galatinus, Kircher, or Picus de Mirandola. It is necessary to study and understand the Hebrew writers in the collection of Pistorius, the Sefer Yetzirah above all. It is essential in particular to master the great book Zohar, to investigate the collection of 1684 entitled Kabbalah Denudata, especially the treatise on Kabbalistic pneumatics, and that on the revolution of souls, and afterwards to enter boldly into the luminous darkness of the whole dogmatic and allegorical body of the Talmud. We shall be then in a position to understand William Postel, and shall admit secretly that, apart from his very premature and over-generous dreams about the emancipation of women, this celebrated, learned, illuminated man could not have been so mad as is pretended by those who have not read him. We have sketched rapidly the history of occult philosophy. We have indicated its sources and analyzed in a few words its chief memorials. The present division of our work refers only to the science, but magic, or rather magical power, comprehends two things, a science and a force. Without the force, the science is nothing, or rather, it is a danger. To give knowledge to power alone, such is the supreme law of initiations. Hence did the great revealer say, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent only shall carry it away. The door of truth is closed like the sanctuary of a virgin. He must be a man who would enter. All miracles are promised to faith, and what is faith except the audacity of will which does not hesitate in the darkness, but advances towards the light in spite of all ordeals and surmounting all obstacles? It is unnecessary to repeat here the history of ancient initiations. The more dangerous and terrible they were, the greater was their efficacy. Hence, in those days, the world had men to govern and instruct it. The sacerdotal art and the royal art consisted above all in ordeals of courage, discretion, and will. It was a novitiate similar to that of those priests who, under the name of Jesuits, are so unpopular at the present day, but would govern the world notwithstanding, had they a truly wise and intelligent chief. After passing our life in the search for the absolute in religion, science, and justice, after revolving in the circle of Faust, we have reached the primal doctrine in the first book of humanity. At this point we pause, having discovered the secret of human omnipotence and indefinite progress, the key of all symbolisms, the first and final doctrine. We have come to understand what was meant by that expression so often made use of in the gospel, the kingdom of God. To provide a fixed point as a fulcrum for human activity is to solve the problem of Archimedes by realizing the use of his famous lever. This it is which was accomplished by the great initiators who have electrified the world, and they could not have done so except by means of the great and incommunicable secret. However, as a guarantee of its renewed youth, the symbolical phoenix never reappeared before the eyes of the world without having consumed solemnly the remains and evidences of its previous life. So also Moses saw to it that all those who had known Egypt and her mysteries should end their life in the desert. At Ephesus, St. Paul burnt all the books which treated of the occult sciences, and in fine, the French Revolution, daughter of the great Johannite Orient in the ashes of the Templars, spoliated the churches and blasphemed the allegories of the divine cultus. But all doctrines and all revivals proscribe magic and condemn its mysteries to the flames and to oblivion. The reason is that each religion or philosophy which comes into the world is a Benjamin of humanity, and ensures its own life by destroying its mother. It is because the symbolical serpent turns ever devouring its own tail. It is because, as essential condition of existence, a void is necessary to every plenitude, space for every dimension, an affirmation for each negation. Herein is the eternal realization of the Phoenix allegory. Two illustrious scholars have preceded me along the path that I am traveling, but they have, so to speak, spent the dark night therein. I refer to Volney and Dupuy, to Dupuy above all, whose immense erudition produced only a negative work, for in the origin of all religions he saw nothing but astronomy, taking thus the symbolic cycle for doctrine and the calendar for legend. He was deficient in one branch of knowledge, that of true magic which comprises the secrets of the Kabbalah. Dupuy passed through the ancient sanctuaries, like the prophet Ezekiel over the plain strewn with bones, and only understood death for want of that word which collects the virtue of the four winds, and can make a living people of all the vast ossuary, by crying to the ancient symbols, "Arise, take up a new form, and walk." But the hour has come when we must have the courage to attempt what no one has dared to perform previously. Like Julian, we would rebuild the temple, and in so doing, we do not believe that we shall be belying a wisdom that we venerate, which also Julian would himself have been worthy to adore, had the rancorous and fanatical doctors of his period permitted him to understand it. For us, the temple has two pillars, on one of which Christianity has inscribed its name. We have therefore no wish to attack Christianity. Far from it. We seek to explain and accomplish it. Intelligence and will have exercised alternately their power in the world. Religion and philosophy are still at war with one another, but they must end in agreement. The provisional object of Christianity was to establish, by obedience and faith, a supernatural or religious equality among men, to immobilize intelligence by faith, so as to provide a fulcrum for virtue which came for the destruction of the aristocracy of science, or rather to replace that aristocracy then already destroyed. Philosophy, on the contrary, has labored to bring back men by liberty and reason to natural inequality, and to substitute wits for virtue by inaugurating the reign of industry. Neither of these operations has proved complete or adequate. Neither has brought men to perfection and felicity. That which is now dreamed, almost without daring to hope for it, is an alliance between the two forces so long regarded as contrary, and there is good ground for desiring it, seeing that these two great powers of the human soul are no more opposed to one another than is the sex of man opposed to that of a woman. Undoubtedly they differ, but their apparently contrary dispositions come only from their aptitude to meet and unite. No less is proposed, therefore, than a universal solution of all problems. The answer is yes, unquestionably, since we are concerned with explaining the philosophical stone, perpetual motion, the secret of the great work, and of the universal medicine. We shall be accused of insanity like the divine Paracelsus, or of charlatanism like the great and unfortunate Agrippa. If the pyre of urban grandeur be extinguished, the sullen proscriptions of silence and of calumny remain. We do not defy, but are resigned to them. We have not sought the publication of this book of our own will, and we believe that if the time be come to bear witness, it will be borne by us or by others. We shall therefore remain calm and shall wait. Our work is in two parts. In the one we establish the Kabbalistic and magical doctrine in its entirety. The other is consecrated to the cultus, that is, to ceremonial magic. The one is that which the ancient sages term the clavicle, the other that which people on the countryside still call the grimoire. The numbers and subjects of the chapters which correspond in both parts are in no sense arbitrary, and are all indicated in the great universal key, of which we give for the first time a complete and adequate explanation. Let this work now go its way where it will, and become what Providence determines. It is finished, and we believe it to be enduring, because it is strong, like all that is reasonable and conscientious. Eliphas Levi. The Candidate. Disciplina and Sophcator. When a philosopher adopted as the basis for a new apocalypse of human wisdom the axiom, I think, therefore I am, in a measure he altered unconsciously from the standpoint of Christian revelation the old conception of the Supreme Being. I am that I am, said the being of beings of Moses. I am he who thinks, says the man of Descartes, and to think being to speak inwardly, such a one may affirm, like the God of St. John the Evangelist, I am he in whom and by whom the word manifests. In principio erat verbum. Now, what is this principle? It is a groundwork of speech. It is a reason for the existence of the word. The essence of the word is in the principle. The principle is that which is. Intelligence is a principle which speaks. What further is intellectual light? It is speech. What is revelation? It is speech also. Being is the principle, speech is the means, and the plenitude or development and perfection of being is the end. To speak is to create, but to say, I think, therefore I exist, is to argue from consequence to principle, and certain contradictions which have been adduced by a great writer, Lamennais, have proved abundantly the philosophical unsoundness of this method. I am, therefore something exists, might seem to be a more primitive and simple foundation for experimental philosophy. I am, therefore being exists. Ego sum qui sum, which is the first revelation of God in man and of man in the world, while it is also the first axiom of occult philosophy. Being is being. Hence this philosophy, having that which is for its principle, can be in no sense hypothesis or guesswork. Mercurius Trismegistus begins his admirable symbol known under the name of the Emerald Table, by this threefold affirmation. It is true, it is certain without error, it is of all truth. Thus in physics the true confirmed by experience, in philosophy certitude purged from any alloy of error, in the domain of religion or the infinite, absolute truth indicated by analogy, Such are the first necessities of true science, and magic only can impart these to its adepts. But you, before all things, who are you, thus taking this work in your hands and proposing to read it? On the pediment of a temple consecrated by antiquity to the god of light was an inscription of 2 words, Know thyself. I impress the same counsel on every man when he seeks to approach science. Magic, which the men of old denominated the sanctum regnum, the holy kingdom or kingdom of God, regnum Dei, exists only for kings and for priests. Are you priests? Are you kings? The priesthood of magic is not a vulgar priesthood, and its royalty enters not into competition with the princes of this world. The monarchs of science are the priests of truth, and their sovereignty is hidden from the multitude like their prayers and sacrifices. The kings of science are men who know the truth, and them the truth has made free, according to the specific promise given by the most mighty of all initiators. The man who is enslaved by his passions or worldly prejudices can be initiated in no wise. He must reform, or he will never attain. Meanwhile, he cannot be an adept, for this word signifies a person who is achieved by will and by work. The man who loves his own opinions and fears to part with them, who suspects new truths, who is unprepared to doubt everything rather than admit anything on chance, should close this book. For him it is useless and dangerous. He will fail to understand it, and it will trouble him, while if he should divine the meaning, there will be a still greater source of disquietude. If you hold by anything in the world more than by reason, truth, and justice, if your will be uncertain and vacillating either in good or evil, if logic alarm you or the naked truth make you blush, if you are hurt when accepted errors are assailed, condemn this work straight away. Do not read it, let it cease to exist for you, but at the same time do not cry it down as dangerous. The secrets which it records will be understood by an elect few and will be reserved by those who understand them. Show light to the birds of the night time, and you hide their light. It is the light which blinds them, and for them is darker than darkness. It follows that I shall speak clearly and make known everything with the firm conviction that initiates alone, or those who deserve initiation, will read all and understand in part. There is a true and a false science, a divine and an infernal magic. In other words, one which is delusive and tenebrous. It is our task to reveal the one and to unveil the other, to distinguish the magician from the sorcerer and the adept from the charlatan. The magician avails himself of a force which he knows. The sorcerer seeks to misuse that which he does not understand. If it be possible in a scientific work to employ a term so vulgar and so discredited, then the devil gives himself to the magician and the sorcerer gives himself to the devil. The magician is the sovereign pontiff of nature. The sorcerer is her profaner only. The sorcerer is in the same relation to the magician that a superstitious and fanatical person bears to a truly religious man. Before proceeding further, let us define magic in a sentence. Magic is the traditional science of the secrets of nature which has been transmitted to us from the Magi. By means of this science, the adept is invested with a species of relative omnipotence and can operate superhumanly, that is, after a manner which transcends the normal possibility of men. Thereby many illustrious hierophants, such as Mercurius Trismegistus, Osiris, Orpheus, Apollonius of Tyana, and others whom it might be dangerous or unwise to name, came after their death to be adored and invoked as gods. Thereby others also, according to that ebb and flow of opinion which is responsible for the caprices of success, became emissaries of Infernus or suspected adventurers, like the Emperor Julian, Apuleius, the enchanter Merlin, and that arch-sorcerer, as he was termed in his day, the illustrious and unfortunate Cornelius Agrippa. To maintain the sanctum regnum, in other words, the knowledge and power of the Magi, there are 4 indispensable conditions: an intelligence illuminated by study, an intrepidity which nothing can check, a will which cannot be broken, and a prudence which nothing can corrupt and nothing intoxicate. To know, to dare, to will, to keep silence. Such are the 4 words of the Magus inscribed upon the 4 symbolical forms of the Sphinx. These maxims can be combined after 4 manners and explained 4 times by one another. On the first page of the Book of Hermes, the adept is depicted with a large hat, which, if turned down, would conceal his entire head. One hand is raised towards heaven, which he seems to command with his wand, while the other is placed upon his breast. Before him are the chief symbols or instruments of science, and he has others hidden in a juggler's wallet. His body and arms form the letter Aleph, the first of that alphabet which the Jews borrowed from the Egyptians. To this symbol we shall have occasion to recur later on. The Magus is truly that which the Hebrew Kabbalists term Microprosopis, otherwise the creator of the little world. The first of all magical sciences being the knowledge of oneself, so is one's own creation first of all works of science. It comprehends the others and is the beginning of the great work. The expression, however, requires explanation. Supreme reason being the sole invariable and consequently imperishable principle, and death as we call it being change, it follows that the intelligence which cleaves closely to this principle and in a manner identifies itself therewith, does hereby make itself unchangeable and as a result immortal. To cleave invariably to reason, it will be understood that it is necessary to attain independence of all those forces which by their fatal and inevitable operation produce the alternatives of life and death. To know how to suffer, to forbear and to die, such are the first secrets which place us beyond reach of affliction, the desires of the flesh and the fear of annihilation. The man who seeks and finds a glorious death has faith in immortality, and universal humanity believes in it with him and for him, raising altars and statues to his memory in token of eternal life. Man becomes king of the brutes only by subduing or taming them, otherwise he will be their victim or slave. Brutes are the type of our passions. They are the instinctive forces of nature. The world is a field of battle where liberty struggles with inertia by the opposition of active force. Physical laws are millstones. If you cannot be the miller, you must be the grain. You are called to be king of air, water, earth, and fire, but to reign over these 4 living creatures of symbolism, it is necessary to conquer and enchain them. He who aspires to be a sage and to know the great enigma of nature must be the heir and despoiler of the Sphinx. His the human head in order to possess speech, his the eagle's wings in order to scale the heights, his the bull's flanks in order to furrow the depths, his the lion's talons to make a way on the right and the left, before and behind. You, therefore, who seek initiation, are you learned as Faust? Are you insensible as Job? No, is it not so? But you may become like unto both if you choose. Have you overcome the vortices of vague thoughts? Are you without indecision or capriciousness? Do you consent to pleasure only when you will, and do you wish for it only when you should? No, is it not so? Not at least invariably, but this may come to pass if you choose. The Sphinx has not only a man's head, it has woman's breasts. Do you know how to resist feminine charms? No, is it not so? And you laugh outright in replying, parading your moral weakness for the glorification of your physical and vital force. Be it so. I allow you to render this homage to the ass of Sterne or Apuleius. The ass has its merit, I agree. It was consecrated to Priapus, as was the goat to the god of Mendes. But take it for what it is worth, and decide whether ass or man shall be master. He alone can possess truly the pleasure of love who has conquered the love of pleasure. To be able and to forbear is to be twice able. Woman enchains you by your desires. Master your desires, and you will enchain her. The greatest injury that can be inflicted on a man is to call him a coward. Now, what is a cowardly person? One who neglects his moral dignity in order to obey blindly the instincts of nature. As a fact, in the presence of danger, it is natural to be afraid and seek flight. Why, then, is it shameful? Because honor has erected it into a law that we must prefer our duty to our inclinations or fears. What is honor from this point of view? It is a universal presentience of immortality and appreciation of the means which can lead to it. The last trophy which a man can win from death is to triumph over the appetite for life, not by despair, but by a more exalted hope, which is contained in faith, for all that is noble and honest by the undivided consent of the world. To learn self-conquest is therefore to learn life, and the austerities of Stoicism were no vain parade of freedom. To yield to the forces of nature is to follow the stream of collective life and to be the slave of secondary causes. To resist and subdue nature is to make for oneself a personal and imperishable life. It is to break free from the vicissitudes of life and death. Every man who is prepared to die rather than renounce truth and justice is most truly living, for immortality abides in his soul. To find or to form such men was the end of all ancient initiations. Pythagoras disciplined his pupils by silence and all kinds of self-denial. Candidates in Egypt were tried by the 4 elements, and we know the self-inflicted austerities of fakirs and Brahmins in India for attaining the kingdom of free will and divine independence. All macerations of asceticism are borrowed from the initiations of the ancient mysteries. They have ceased because those qualified for initiation no longer finding initiators, and the leaders of conscience becoming in the lapse of time as uninstructed as the vulgar, the blind have grown weary of following the blind, and no one has cared to pass through ordeals the end of which was only in doubt and despair. The path of light was lost. To succeed in performing something we must know that which it is proposed to do, or at least must have faith in someone who does know it. But shall I stake my life on a venture, or follow someone at chance who himself cannot see where he is going? We must not set out rashly along the path of the transcendental sciences, but once started we must reach the end or perish. To doubt is to lose one's reason. To pause is to fall. To recoil is to plunge into an abyss. You, therefore, who are undertaking the study of this book, if you persevere to the end and understand it, you will either be a monarch or madman. Do what you will with the volume, you will be unable to despise or to forget it. If you are pure, it will be your light. If strong, your arm. If holy, your religion. If wise, the rule of your wisdom. But if you are wicked, for you it will be an infernal torch. It will lacerate your breast like a poniard. It will rankle in your memory like a remorse. It will people your imagination with chimeras and will drive you through folly to despair. You will endeavor to laugh at it and will only gnash your teeth. It will be like the file in the fable which the serpent tried to bite but destroyed all of its teeth. Let us now enter on the series of initiations. I have said that revelation is the word. As a fact, the word or speech is the veil of being and the characteristic sign of life. Every form is the veil of a word because the idea, which is the mother of the word, is the sole reason for the existence of forms. Every figure is a character. Every character derives from and returns into a word. For this reason, the ancient sages, of whom Trismegistus is the organ, formulated their sole dogma in these terms. That which is above is like unto that which is below, and that which is below unto that which is above. In other words, the form is proportional to the idea. The shadow is the measure of the body calculated in its relation to the luminous ray. The scabbard is as deep as the sword is long. The negation is in proportion to the contrary affirmation. Production is equal to destruction in the movement which preserves life. And there is no point in infinite extension which may not be regarded as the center of a circle, having an expanding circumference receding indefinitely into space. Every individuality is therefore indefinitely perfectible, since the moral order is analogous to the physical, and since we cannot conceive any point as unable to dilate, increase, and radiate in a philosophically unlimited circle. What can be affirmed of the soul in its totality may be affirmed of each faculty of the soul. The intelligence and will of man are instruments of incalculable power and capacity, but intelligence and will possess as their helpmate and instrument a faculty which is too imperfectly known, the omnipotence of which belongs exclusively to the domain of magic. I speak of the imagination, which the Kabbalists term the diaphane or translucid. Imagination, in effect, is like the soul's eye. Therein forms are outlined and preserved. Thereby we behold the reflections of the invisible world. It is the glass of visions and the apparatus of magical life. By its intervention we heal diseases, modify the seasons, warn off death from the living, and raise the dead to life, because it is the imagination which exalts will and gives it power over the universal agent. Imagination determines the shape of the child in its mother's womb and decides the destiny of men. It lends wings to contagion and directs the arms of warfare. Are you exposed in battle? Believe yourself to be invulnerable like Achilles, and you will be so, says Paracelsus. Fear attracts bullets, but they are repelled by courage. It is well known that persons with amputated limbs feel pain in the vicinity of members which they possess no longer. Paracelsus operated upon living blood by medicating the product of a bleeding. He cured headache at a distance by treating hair cut from the patient. By the science of the theoretical unity and solidarity between all parts of the body, he anticipated and outstripped the theories, or rather experiences, of our most celebrated magnetists. Hence his cures were miraculous, and to his name of Philip Theophrastus Bombast he deserved the addition of Aurelius Paracelsus, with the further epithet of divine. Imagination is the instrument of the adaptation of the word. Imagination applied to reason is genius. Reason is one, as genius is one, in all the variety of its works. There is one principle, there is one truth, there is one reason, there is one absolute and universal philosophy. Whatsoever is subsists in unity, considered as beginning, and returns into unity, considered as end. One is in one, that is to say, all is in all. Unity is the principle of numbers. It is also the principle of motion and consequently of life. The entire human body is recapitulated in the unity of a single organ, which is the brain. All religions are summed up in the unity of a single dogma, which is the affirmation of being and its equality with itself, and this constitutes its mathematical value. There is only one dogma in magic, and it is this: the visible is the manifestation of the invisible, or in other terms, the perfect word, in things appreciable and visible, bears an exact proportion to the things which are inappreciable by our senses and unseen by our eyes. The magus raises one hand towards heaven and points down with the other to earth, saying, above immensity, below immensity still. Immensity equals immensity. This is true in things seen as in things unseen. The first letter in the alphabet of the sacred language, Aleph, represents a man extending one hand towards heaven and the other to the earth. It is an expression of the active principle in everything. It is creation in heaven corresponding to the omnipotence of the word below. This letter is a pantacle in itself, that is, a character expressing the universal science. It is supplementary to the sacred signs of the macrocosm and microcosm. It explains the Masonic double triangle and five-pointed blazing star, for the word is one, and revelation is one. By endowing man with reason, God gave him speech, and revelation, manifold in its forms, but one in its principle, consists entirely in the universal word, the interpreter of absolute reason. This is the significance of that term so much misconstrued, Catholicity, which in modern hieratic language means infallibility. The universal in reason is the absolute, and the absolute is the infallible. If absolute reason impelled universal society to believe irresistibly the utterance of a child, that child would be infallible by the ordination of God and of all humanity. Faith is nothing else but reasonable confidence in this unity of reason, and in this universality of the word. To believe is to place confidence in that which as yet we do not know, when reason assures us beforehand of ultimately knowing or at least recognizing it. Absurd are the so-called philosophers who cry, I will never believe in a thing which I do not know. Shallow reasoners, if you knew, would you need to believe? But must I believe on chance and apart from reason? Certainly not. Blind and haphazard belief is superstition and folly. We may have faith in causes which reason compels us to admit on the evidence of effects known and appreciated by science. Science, great word and great problem. What is science? We shall answer in the second chapter of this book. The Pillars of the Temple. Chokmah Domus Gnosis. Science is the absolute and complete possession of truth. Hence have the sages of all the centuries trembled before such an absolute and terrible word. They have hesitated in arrogating to themselves the first privilege of divinity by assuming the possession of science, and have been contented, instead of the verb to know, with that which expresses learning, while in place of the word science, they have adopted that of gnosis, which represents simply the notion of learning by intuition. What, in fact, does man know? Nothing, and at the same time he is allowed to ignore nothing. Devoid of knowledge, he is called upon to know all. Now, knowledge supposes the duad, a being who knows and an object known. The duad is the generator of society and of law. It is also the number of the gnosis. The duad is unity multiplying itself in order to create, and hence in sacred symbolism Eve issues from the inmost bosom of Adam. Adam is the human tetragram, summoned up by the mysterious Jod, type of the Kabbalistic phallus. By adding to this Jod the triadic name of Eve, the name of Jehovah is formed, the divine tetragram, which is eminently the Kabbalistic and magical word, being that which the high priest in the temple pronounced Jocheva. So unity, complete in the fruitfulness of the triad, forms therewith the tetrad, which is the key of all numbers, of all movements, and of all forms. By a revolution about its own center, the square produces a circle equal to itself, and this is the quadrature of the circular movement of 4 equal angles around the same point. That which is above equals that which is below, says Hermes. Here then is the duad serving as the measure of unity, and the relation of equality between above and below forms with these the triad. The creative principle is the ideal phallus. The created principle is the formal teis. The insertion of the vertical phallus into the horizontal teis forms the stauros of the Gnostics, or the philosophical cross of Masons. Thus, the intersection of 2 produces 4, which, by its movement, defines the circle with all degrees thereof. 1 is the principle, 2 is the word, A is the active, B is the passive. The monad is Boaz, the duad is Jachin. In the trigrams of Fohi, unity is the yang and the duad is the yin. Boaz and Jachin are the names of the 2 symbolical pillars before the principal entrance of Solomon's Kabbalistic temple. In the Kabbalah, these pillars explain all mysteries of antagonism, whether natural, political, or religious. They elucidate also the procreative struggle between man and woman, for according to the law of nature, the woman must resist the man, and he must entice or overcome her. The active principle seeks the passive principle. The plenum desires the void. The serpent's jaw attracts the serpent's tail, and in turning about upon himself, he at the same time flies and pursues himself. Woman is the creation of man, and universal creation is the bride of the first principle. When the Supreme Being became a creator, he erected a jod, or a phallus, and to provide a place in the fullness of the uncreated light, it was necessary to hollow out a teis, or trench of shadow, equivalent to the dimension determined by his creative desire, and attributed by him to the ideal jod of the radiating light. Such is the mysterious language of the Kabbalists and the Talmud, and on account of vulgar ignorance and malignity, it is impossible for us to explain or simplify it further. What then is creation? It is the house of the creative word. What is the teis? It is the house of the phallus. What is the nature of the active principle? To diffuse. What is that of the passive? To gather in and to fructify. What is man? He who initiates, who toils, who furrows, who sows. What is woman? She who forms, unites, irrigates, and harvests. Man wages war. Woman brings peace about. Man destroys to create. Woman builds up to preserve. Man is revolution. Woman is conciliation. Man is the father of Cain. Woman the mother of Abel. What also is wisdom? It is the agreement and union of two principles, the mildness of Abel directing the activity of Cain, man guided by the sweet inspirations of woman, debauchery conquered by lawful marriage, revolutionary energy softened and subdued by the gentleness of order and peace, pride subjugated by love, science acknowledging the inspirations of faith. It is then that science becomes wise and submits to the infallibility of universal reason, instructed by love or universal charity. Then it can assume the name of gnosis, because it knows at least that as yet it cannot boast of knowing perfectly. The monad can manifest only by the duad. Unity itself and the notion of unity at once constitute two. The unity of the macrocosm reveals itself by the two opposite points of two triangles. Human unity fulfills itself to right and left. Primitive man is androgynous. All organs of the human body are disposed in pairs, excepting the nose, the tongue, the umbilicus, and the Kabbalistic jod. Divinity, one in its essence, has two essential conditions as the fundamental grounds of its being: necessity and liberty. The laws of supreme reason necessitate and rule liberty in God, who is of necessity wise and reasonable. To make light visible, God had only to postulate shadow. To manifest the truth, he permitted the possibility of doubt. The shadow bodies forth the light, and the possibility of error is essential for the temporal manifestation of truth. If the buckler of Satan did not intercept the spear of Michael, the might of the angel would be lost in the void or manifested by infinite destruction launched below from above. Did not the heel of Michael restrain Satan in his ascent, Satan would dethrone God, or rather he would lose himself in the abysses of the altitude. Hence Satan is needful to Michael as the pedestal to the statue, and Michael is necessary to Satan as the brake to the locomotive. In analogical and universal dynamics, one leans only on that which resists. Furthermore, the universe is balanced by two forces which maintain it in equilibrium, being the force which attracts and that which repels. They exist alike in physics, in philosophy, and in religion. In physics they produce equilibrium, in philosophy criticism, in religion progressive revelation. The ancients represented this mystery by the conflict between Eros and Anteros, the struggle between Jacob and the angel, and by the equilibrium of the Golden Mountain, which gods on the one side and demons on the other encircle with the symbolic serpent of India. It is typified also by the caduceus of Hermanubis, by the two cherubim of the ark, by the twofold sphinx of the chariot of Osiris, and by the two seraphim, respectively black and white. Its scientific reality is demonstrated by the phenomena of polarity, as also by the universal law of sympathies and antipathies. The undiscerning disciples of Zoroaster divided the duad without referring it to unity, thus separating the pillars of the temple and endeavoring to have God. Conceive the absolute as two, and you must immediately conceive it as three to recover the unity principle. For this reason, the material elements analogous to the divine elements are understood firstly as four, explained as two, and exist ultimately as three. Revelation is the duad. Every word is double and supposes two. The ethic which results from revelation is founded on antagonism, and this results from the duad. Spirit and form attract and repel one another, like sign and idea, fiction and truth. Supreme reason necessitates dogma when communicating to finite intelligences, and dogma by its passage from the domain of ideas to that of forms participates in two worlds and has inevitably two senses testifying in succession, or simultaneously, that is, to the spirit and the flesh. So are there two forces in the moral region, one which attacks and one which restrains and expiates. They are represented in the mythos of Genesis by the typical personalities of Cain and Abel. Abel oppresses Cain by reason of his moral superiority. Cain, to get free, immortalizes his brother by slaying him and becomes the victim of his own crime. Cain could not suffer the life of Abel, and the blood of Abel suffers not the sleep of Cain. In the Gospel, the type of Cain is replaced by that of the prodigal son, whom his father forgives freely because he returns after having endured much. There is mercy and there is justice in God. To the just he dispenses justice, and to sinners mercy. In the soul of the world, which is the universal agent, there is a current of love and a current of wrath. This ambient and all-penetrating fluid, this ray loosened from the sun's splendor and fixed by the weight of the atmosphere and the power of central attraction, this body of the Holy Spirit which we term the universal agent, while it was typified by the ancients under the symbol of a serpent devouring its tail, this electromagnetic ether, this vital and luminous caloric is depicted in archaic monuments by the girdle of Isis, twice folded in a love knot round two poles, as well as by the serpent devouring its own tail, emblematic of prudence and of Saturn. Motion and life consist in the extreme tension of two forces. "I would thou wert cold or hot," said the Master. As a fact, a great sinner is more really alive than is a tepid, effeminate man, and the fullness of his return to virtue will be in proportion to the extent of his errors. She who is destined to crush the serpent's head is intelligence, which ever rises above the stream of blind forces. The Kabbalists call her the Virgin of the Sea, whose dripping feet the infernal dragon crawls forward to lick with his fiery tongues, and they fall asleep in delight. Hereof are the hieratic mysteries of the duad, but there is one, and the last of all, which must not be made known. The reason, according to Hermes Trismegistus, being the malcomprehension of the vulgar, who would ascribe to the necessities of science the immoral aspect of blind fatality. By the year of the unknown must the crowd be restrained, he observes in another place, and Christ also said, "Cast not your pearls before swine, lest trampling them under their feet, they turn and rend you." The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, of which the fruits are death, is the type of this hieratic secret of the duad, which would be only misconstrued if divulged, and would lead commonly to the unholy denial of free will, though it is the principle of moral life. It is hence in the essence of things that the revelation of this secret means death, and it is not at the same time the great secret of magic, but the arcanum of the duad leads up to that of the tetrad, or more correctly proceeds therefrom and is resolved by the triad, which contains the word of that enigma propounded by the Sphinx, the finding of which would have saved the life, atoned for the unconscious crime, and established the kingdom of Oedipus. In the hieroglyphic work of Hermes, being the tarot or Book of Thoth, the duad is represented either by the horns of Isis, who has her head veiled and an open book concealed partially under her mantle, or otherwise by a sovereign lady, Juno, the Greek goddess, with one hand uplifted towards heaven and the other pointed to earth, as if formulating by this gesture the one and twofold dogma, which is the foundation of magic and begins the marvelous symbols of the Emerald Table of Hermes. In the Apocalypse of St. John, there is reference to two witnesses or martyrs on whom prophetic tradition confers the names of Elias and Enoch. Elias, man of faith, enthusiasm, miracle. Enoch, one with him who was called Hermes by the Egyptians, honored by the Phoenicians as Cadmus, author of the sacred alphabet and the universal key to the initiations of the Logos, father of the Kabbalah. He who, according to sacred allegories, did not die like other men, but was translated to heaven, and will return at the end of time. Much the same parable is told of St. John himself, who recovered and explained in his Apocalypse the symbolism of the word of Enoch. This resurrection of St. John and Enoch, expected at the close of the ages of ignorance, will be the renovation of their doctrine by the comprehension of the Kabbalistic keys which unlock the temple of unity and of universal philosophy, too long occult and reserved solely for the elect, who perish at the hands of the world. But we have said that the reproduction of the monad by the duad leads of necessity to the conception and dogma of the triad, so we come now to this great number which is the fullness and perfect word of unity. The Triangle of Solomon. Plenitudo vocis bina physis. The perfect word is the triad because it supposes an intelligent principle, a speaking principle, and a principle spoken. The absolute revealed by speech endows this speech with a sense equivalent to itself, and in the understanding thereof creates its third self. So also the sun manifests by its light and proves or makes this manifestation efficacious by heat. The triad is delineated in space by the heavenly zenith, the infinite height, connected with east and west by two straight diverging lines. With this visible triangle, reason compares another which is invisible, but is assumed to be equal in dimension. The abyss is its apex, and its reverse base is parallel to the horizontal line stretching from east to west. These two triangles, combined in a single figure, which is the six-pointed star, form the sacred symbol of Solomon's seal, the resplendent star of the macrocosm. The notion of the infinite and the absolute is expressed by this sign, which is the grand pantacle, that is to say, the most simple and complete abridgment of the science of all things. Grammar itself attributes three persons to the verb. The first is that which speaks, the second that which is spoken to, and the third the object. In creating, the infinite prince speaks to himself of himself. Such is the explanation of the triad and the origin of the dogma of the Trinity. The magical dogma is also 1 in 3 and 3 in 1. That which is above is like or equal to that which is below. Thus, two things which resemble one another and the word which signifies their resemblance make three. The triad is the universal dogma. In magic, principle, realization, adaptation. In alchemy, azoth, incorporation, transmutation. In theology, God, incarnation, redemption in the human soul, thought, love, and action. In the family, father, mother, and child. The triad is the end and supreme expression of love. We seek one another as two only to become three. There are three intelligible worlds which correspond one with another by hierarchic analogy: the natural or physical, the spiritual or metaphysical, and the divine or religious worlds. From this principle follows the hierarchy of spirits, divided into three orders, and again subdivided by the triad in each of these. All these revelations are logical deductions from the first mathematical notions of being and number. Unity must multiply itself in order to become active. An indivisible, motionless, and sterile principle would be unity dead and incomprehensible. Were God only one, he would never be creator or father. Were he two, there would be antagonism or division in the infinite, which would mean the division also or death of all possible things. He is, therefore, three for the creation by himself, and in his image of the infinite multitude of beings and numbers. So is he truly one in himself and triple in our conception, which also leads us to behold him as triple in himself, and one in our intelligence and our love. This is a mystery for the faithful and a logical necessity for the initiate into absolute and real sciences. The word manifested by a life is realization or incarnation. The life of the word accomplishing its cyclic movement is adaptation or redemption. This triple dogma was known in all sanctuaries illuminated by the tradition of the sages. Do you wish to ascertain which is the true religion? Seek that which realizes most in the divine order, which humanizes God and makes man divine, which preserves the triadic dogma intact, which clothes the word with flesh by making God manifest to the hands and eyes of the most ignorant, which in fine appeals to all in its doctrine and can adapt itself to all. The religion which is hierarchic and cyclic, having allegories and images for children, an exalted philosophy for grown men, sublime hopes and sweet consolations for the old. The primeval sages, when seeking the first of causes, behold good and evil in the world. They considered shadow and light. They compared winter with spring, age with youth, life with death, and their conclusion was this: the first cause is beneficent and severe. It gives and takes away life. Then are there two contrary principles, the one good and the other evil, exclaimed the disciples of Manes. No, the two principles of universal equilibrium are not contrary, although contrasted in appearance, for a singular wisdom opposes one to another. Good is on the right, evil on the left, but the supreme excellence is above both, applying evil to the victory of good and good to the amendment of evil. The principle of harmony is in unity, and it is this which imparts such power to the uneven number in magic. Now the most perfect of the odd numbers is 3 because it is the trilogy of unity. In the trigrams of Fohi, the superior triad is composed of 3 yang, or masculine figures, because nothing passive can be admitted into the idea of God, considered as the principle of production in the 3 worlds. For the same reason, the Christian Trinity by no means permits the personification of the Mother, who is shown forth implicitly in that of the Son. For the same reason also, it is contrary to the laws of hieratic and orthodox symbology to personify the Holy Ghost under the form of a woman. Woman comes forth from man as nature comes forth from God. So Christ himself ascends to heaven and assumes the Virgin Mother. We speak of the ascension of the Savior and the assumption of the Mother of God. God, considered as Father, has nature for his daughter. As Son, he has the Virgin for his mother, and the Church for his bride. As Holy Spirit, he regenerates and fructifies humanity. Hence, in the trigrams of Fohi, the 3 inferior yin correspond to the 3 superior yang, for these trigrams constitute a pentacle like that of the 2 triangles of Solomon, but with a triadic interpretation of the 6 points of the blazing star. Dogma is only divine inasmuch as it is truly human, that is to say, in so far as it sums up the highest reason of humanity. So also the Master, whom we term the Man-God, called himself the Son of Man. Revelation is the expression of belief accepted and formulated by universal reason in the human word, on which account it is said that the divinity is human and the humanity divine in the Man-God. We affirm all this philosophically, not theologically, without infringing in any way on the teaching of the Church, which condemns and must always condemn magic. Paracelsus and Agrippa did not set up altar against altar, but bowed to the ruling religion of their time, to the elect of science, the things of science, to the faithful, the things of faith. In his hymn to the royal son, the Emperor Julian gives a theory of the triad which is almost identical with that of the illuminated Swedenborg. The Son of the divine world is the infinite, spiritual, and uncreated light, which is verbalized, so to speak, in the philosophical world, and becomes the fountain of souls and of truth. Then it incorporates and becomes visible light in the Son of the third world, the central sun of our suns, of which the fixed stars are the ever-living sparks. The Kabbalists compare the spirit to a substance which remains fluid in the divine medium, and under the influence of the essential light, its exterior, however, becoming solidified like wax when exposed to air in the colder realms of reasoning or of visible forms. These shells, envelopes petrified or carnified, where such an expression possible, are the source of errors or of evil, which connects with the heaviness and hardness of animal envelopes. In the book Zohar and in that of the Revolution of Suk, perverse spirits or evil demons are never called otherwise than shells, cortices. The cortices of the world of spirits are transparent, while those of the material world are opaque. Bodies are only temporary shells whence souls have to be liberated, but those who in this life obey the flesh build up an interior body or fluidic shell, which after death becomes their prison house and torment, until the time arrives when they succeed in dissolving it in the warmth of the divine light, towards which, however, the burden of their grossness hinders them from ascending. Indeed, they can do so only after infinite struggles, and by the mediation of the just who stretch forth their hands towards them. During the whole period of the process they are devoured by the interior activity of the captive spirit, as in a burning furnace. Those who attain the pyre of expiation burn themselves thereon, like Hercules upon Mount Oeta, and so are delivered from their sufferings. But the courage of the majority fails before this ordeal, which seems to them a second death more appalling than the first, and so they remain in hell, which is rightly and actually eternal. But souls are never precipitated nor even retained despite themselves therein. The three worlds correspond together by means of the 32 paths of light, which are as steps of a sacred ladder. Every true thought corresponds to a divine grace in heaven and a good work on earth. Every grace of God manifests a truth and produces one or many acts reciprocally. Every act effects a truth or falsehood in the heavens, a grace or punishment. When a man pronounces the tetragram, say the Kabbalists, the 9 celestial realms sustain a shock, and then all the spirits cry out one upon another, "Who is it thus disturbing the kingdom of heaven?" Then does the earth communicate unto the first sphere the sins of that rash being who takes the eternal name in vain, and the accusing word is transmitted from circle to circle, from star to star, and from hierarchy to hierarchy. Every utterance possesses 3 senses. Every act has a triple range, every form a triple idea, for the absolute corresponds from world to world by its forms. Every determination of human will modifies nature, concerns philosophy, and is written in heaven. There are consequently 2 fatalities, one resulting from the uncreated will in harmony with its proper wisdom, the other from created wills in accordance with the necessity of secondary causes in their correspondence with the first cause. There is hence nothing indifferent in life, and our seeming most simple resolutions do often determine an incalculable series of benefits or evils, above all in the affinities of our diaphany with the great magical agent, as we shall explain elsewhere. The triad being the fundamental principle of the whole Kabbalah, or sacred tradition of our fathers, was necessarily the fundamental dogma of Christianity, the apparent dualism of which it explains by the intervention of a harmonious and all-powerful unity. Christ did not put his teaching into writing, and only revealed it in secret to his favored disciple, the one Kabbalist, and he a great Kabbalist among the apostles. So is the Apocalypse the book of the Gnosis, or secret doctrine of the first Christians, and the key of this doctrine is indicated by an occult versicle of the Lord's Prayer, which the Vulgate leaves untranslated, while in the Greek Rite, which preserves the traditions of St. John, the priests only are permitted to pronounce it. This versicle, completely Kabbalistic, is found in the Greek text of the Gospel according to St. Matthew, and in several Hebrew copies as follows. The sacred word Malkuth, substituted for Kether, which is its Kabbalistic correspondent, in the equipoise of Geburah and Chesed, repeating itself in the circles of heavens called eons by the Gnostics, provided the keystone of the whole Christian temple in this occult versicle. It has been retained by Protestants in their New Testament, but they have failed to discern its lofty and wonderful meaning, which would have unveiled to them all the mysteries of the Apocalypse. There is, however, a tradition in the Church that the manifestation of these mysteries is reserved till the last times. Malkuth, based upon Geburah and Chesed, is the temple of Solomon, having Jachin and Boaz for its pillars. It is Adamite dogma, founded for the one part on the resignation of Abel, and for the other on the labors and self-reproach of Cain. It is the equilibrium of being established on necessity and liberty, stability and motion. It is the demonstration of the universal lever sought in vain by Archimedes, a scholar whose talents were employed in the culture of obscurity, who died without seeking to be understood, resolved this supreme equation, discovered by him in the Kabbalah, and was in dread of its source transpiring if he expressed himself more clearly. We have seen one of his disciples and admirers most indignant, perhaps in good faith, at the suggestion that his master was a Kabbalist, but we can state, notwithstanding, to the glory of the same learned man, that his researches have shortened appreciably our work on the occult sciences, and that the key of the transcendent Kabbalah, above all indicated in the arcane versicle cited above, has been applied skillfully to an absolute reform of all sciences in the books of Hohen Rodsky. The secret virtue of the Gospels is therefore contained in 3 words, and these 3 words have established 3 dogmas and 3 hierarchies. All science reposes upon 3 principles as the syllogism upon 3 terms. There are also 3 distinct classes, or 3 original and natural ranks among men, who are called to advance from the lower to the higher. The Jews term these three series or degrees in the progress of spirits Asaya, Yetzirah, and Briah. The Gnostics, who were Christian Kabbalists, called them Heil, Psyche, and Gnosis. By the Jews, the supreme circle was named Atziluth, and by the Gnostics, Pleroma. In the tetragram, the triad, taken at the beginning of the word, expresses the divine copulation. Taken at the end, it expressed the female and maternity. Eve has a name of 3 letters, but the primitive Adam is signified simply by the letter Jod, whence Jehovah should be pronounced Java, and this point leads us to the great and supreme mystery of magic embodied in the tetrad. The tetragram. Gebura Chesed Porta Libarum Elementa. In nature, there are 2 forces producing equilibrium, and these 3 constitute a single law. Here, then, is the triad resumed in unity, and by adding the conception of unity to that of the triad, we are brought to the tetrad, the first square and perfect number, the source of all numerical combinations and the principle of all forms. Affirmation, negation, discussion, solution. Such are the 4 philosophical operations of the human mind. Discussion conciliates negation with affirmation by rendering them necessary to each other. In the same way, the philosophical triad, emanating from the antagonism of the duad, is completed by the tetrad, the 4-square basis of all truth. According to consecrated dogma, there are 3 persons in God, and these 3 constitute one only deity. 3 and 1 provide the conception of 4, because unity is required to explain the 3. Hence, in almost all languages, the name of God consists of 4 letters, and in Hebrew these 4 are really 3, one of them being repeated twice, that which expresses the word and the creation of the word. 2 affirmations make 2 corresponding denials either possible or necessary. The fact of being is affirmed, and that of nothingness is denied. Affirmation as word produces affirmation as realization or incarnation of the word, and each of these affirmations corresponds to the denial of its opposite. Thus, in the opinion of the Kabbalists, the name of the demon or of evil is composed of the same letters as the name of God or goodness, but spelled backwards. This evil is the lost reflection or imperfect mirage of light and shadow. But all which exists, whether of good or evil, of light or darkness, exists and manifests by the tetrad. The affirmation of unity supposes the number 4 unless it turns in unity itself as in a vicious circle. So also the triad, as we have observed already, is explained by the duad and resolved by the tetrad, which is the squared unity of even numbers and the quadrangular base of the cube, regarded as unity of construction, solidity, and measure. The Kabbalistic tetragram, Jodheva, expresses God in humanity and humanity in God. The 4 astronomical cardinal points are, relatively to us, the yea and the nay of light, east and west, and the yea and nay of warmth, south and north. As we have said already, according to the sole dogma of the Kabbalah, that which is in visible nature reveals that which is in the domain of invisible nature, or secondary causes are in strict proportion and analogous to the manifestations of the first cause. So is this first cause revealed invariably by the cross, that unity made up of 2, divided one by the other in order to produce 4, that key to the mysteries of India and Egypt, the Tao of the Patriarchs, the divine sign of Osiris, the Storos of the Gnostics, the keystone of the temple, the symbol of occult masonry, the cross, central point of the junction of the right angles of 2 infinite triangles, the cross which, in the French language, seems to be the first root and fundamental substantive of the verb to believe and the verb to grow, thus combining the conceptions of science, religion, and progress. The great magical agent manifests by 4 kinds of phenomena, and has been subjected to the experiments of profane science under 4 names: caloric, light, electricity, magnetism. It has received also the names of tetragram, Inri, Azoth, ether, odd, magnetic fluid, soul of the earth, Lucifer, etc. The great magical agent is the fourth emanation of the life principle, of which the sun is the third form. See the initiates of the school of Alexandria and the dogma of Hermes Trismegistus. In this way, the eye of the world, as the ancients called it, is the mirage of the reflection of God, and the soul of the earth is a permanent glance of the sun which the earth conceives and guards by impregnation. The moon concurs in this impregnation of the earth by reflecting a solar image during the night, so that Hermes was right when he said of the great agent, "The sun is its father, the moon its mother." Then he adds, "The wind has borne it in the belly thereof," because the atmosphere is the recipient, and, as it were, the crucible of the solar rays, by means of which there forms that living image of the sun which penetrates the whole earth, fructifies it, and determines all that is produced on its surface by its emanations and permanent currents, analogous to those of the sun itself. This solar agent subsists by two contrary forces, one of attraction and one of projection, whence Hermes says that it ascends and descends eternally. The force of attraction is always fixed at the center of bodies, that of projection in their outlines or at their surface. By this dual force all is created and all preserved. Its motion is a rolling up and an unrolling which are successive and unlimited, or rather simultaneous and perpetual, by spirals of opposite movements which never meet. It is the same movement as that of the sun, at once attracting and repelling all the planets of its system. To be acquainted with the movement of this terrestrial sun in such a manner as to be able to apply its currents and direct them is to have accomplished the great work and to be master of the world. Armed with such a force, you may make yourself adored. The crowd will believe that you are God. The absolute secret of this direction has been in the possession of certain men, and can yet be discovered. It is the great magical arcanum, depending on an incommunicable axiom and on an instrument which is the grand and unique Athanor of the highest grade of Hermetists. The incommunicable axiom is enclosed Kabbalistically in the 4 letters of the tetragram, arranged in the following manner. In the letters of the words Azoth and Inri written Kabbalistically, and in the monogram of Christ as embroidered on the labarum, which the Kabbalist Postal interprets by the word rota. Hence, the adepts have formed their tarot or tarot, by the repetition of the first letter, thus indicating the circle and suggesting that the word is read backwards. All magical science is comprised in the knowledge of this secret. To know it and have the courage to use it is human omnipotence. To reveal it to a profane person is to lose it. To reveal it even to a disciple is to abdicate in favor of that disciple, who henceforward possesses the right of life and death over his master. I am speaking from the magical standpoint, and will certainly slay him for fear of dying himself. But this has nothing in common with deeds qualified as murder in criminal legislation. The practical philosophy, which is the basis and point of departure for our laws, does not recognize the facts of bewitchment and of occult influences. We touch here upon extraordinary revelations and are prepared for the unbelief and derision of incredulous fanaticism. Voltairean religion has also its fanatics, Pate the great shades who must now be lurking sullenly in the vaults of the Pantheon, while Catholicism, strong ever in its practices and prestige, chants the office overhead. The perfect word, that which is adequate to the thought which it expresses, always contains virtually or supposes a tetrad. The idea with its 3 necessary and correlated forms, then the image of the thing expressed, with the 3 terms of the judgment which qualifies it. When I say being exists, I affirm implicitly that the void is non-existent. A height, a breadth which the height subdivides longitudinally, a depth separated from the height by the intersection of the breadth, such is the natural tetrad, composed of 2 lines at right angles, one to another. Nature has also 4 motions, products of 2 forces which sustain each other by their tendency in an opposite direction. Now the law which rules bodies is analogous to that which governs minds, and that which governs minds is the very manifestation of God's secret, that is to say, of the mystery of the creation. Imagine a watch having two parallel springs with an engagement which makes them work in an opposite direction, so that the one in unwinding winds up the other. In this way, the watch will wind up itself, and you will have discovered perpetual motion. The engagement should be at two ends and of extreme accuracy. Is this beyond attainment? We think not. But when it is discovered, the inventor will understand by analogy all the secrets of nature. Progress in direct proportion to resistance. The absolute movement of life is thus the perpetual consequence of two contrary tendencies which are never opposed. When one seems to yield to the other, it is like a spring which is winding up, and you may expect a reaction, the moment and characteristics of which it is quite possible to foresee and determine. Hence, at the period of the greatest Christian fervor was the reign of Antichrist known and predicted. But Antichrist will prepare and determine the second advent and final triumph of the man-god. This again is a rigorous and Kabbalistical conclusion contained in the gospel premises. Hence, the Christian prophecy comprises a fourfold revelation. 1. Fall of the old world and triumph of the gospel under the first advent. 2. Great apostasy and coming of Antichrist. 3. Fall of Antichrist and recurrence to Christian ideas. 4. Definitive triumph of the gospel, or second advent, designated under the name of the Last Judgment. This fourfold prophecy contains, as will be seen, two affirmations and two negations, the idea of two ruins or universal deaths and of two resurrections. For to every conception which appears upon the social horizon in east and a west, a zenith and a nadir may be ascribed without fear of error. Thus is the philosophical cross the key of prophecy, and all gates of science may be opened with the pantacle of Ezekiel, the center of which is a star formed by the interlacement of two crosses. Does not human life present itself also under these four phases or successive transformations: birth, life, death, immortality? And remark here that the immortality of the soul, necessitated as a completement of the tetrad, is Kabbalistically proved by analogy, which is the sole dogma of truly universal religion, as it is the key of science and the universal law of nature. As a fact, death can be no more an absolute end than birth is a real beginning. Birth proves the pre-existence of the human being, since nothing is produced from nothing, and death proves immortality, since being can no more cease from being than nothingness can cease to be nothingness. Being and nothingness are two absolutely irreconcilable ideas, with this difference that the idea of nothingness, which is altogether negative, issues from the very idea of being, whence even nothingness cannot be understood as an absolute negation, whilst the notion of being can never be put in comparison with that of nothingness, and still less can it come forth therefrom. To say that the world has been produced out of nothing is to advance a monstrous absurdity. All that is proceeds from what has been, and consequently nothing that is can evermore cease to be. The succession of forms is produced by the alternatives of movement. They are the phenomena of life which replace without destroying one another. All things change, nothing perishes. The sun does not die when it vanishes from the horizon. Even the most fluidic forms are immortal, subsisting always in the permanence of their raison d'etre, which is the combination of light with the aggregated potencies of the molecules of the first substance. Hence they are preserved in the astral fluid, and can be evoked and reproduced according to the will of the sage, as we shall see when treating of second sight and the evocation of memories in necromancy or other magical works. We shall return also to the great magical agent in the 4th chapter of the ritual, where we shall complete our indications of the characteristics of the great arcanum, and of the means of recovering this tremendous power. Here let us add a few words on the 4 magical elements and elementary spirits. The magical elements are, in alchemy, salt, sulfur, mercury, and azoth. In Kabbalah, the macroprosopis, the microprosopis, and the 2 mothers. In hieroglyphics, the man, eagle, lion, and bull. In old physics, according to vulgar names and notions, air, water, earth, and fire. But in magical science we know that water is not ordinary water, fire is not simply fire, etc. These expressions conceal a more recondite meaning. Modern science has decomposed the four elements of the ancients and reduced them to a number of so-called simple bodies. That which is simple, however, is the primitive substance properly so called. There is thus only one material element which manifests always by the tetrad in its forms. We shall therefore preserve the wise distinction of elementary appearances admitted by the ancients, and shall recognize air, fire, earth, and water as the four positive and visible elements of magic. The subtle and the gross, the swift and slow solvent, or the instruments of heat and cold, constitute in occult physics the two positive and negative principles of the tetrad, and should be thus tabulated. Thus, air and earth represent the male principle. Fire and water are referable to the female principle, since the philosophical cross of pentacles, as affirmed already, is a primitive and elementary hieroglyph of the lingam of the gymnosophists. To these four elementary forms correspond the four following philosophical ideas: spirit, matter, motion, rest. As a fact, all science is comprised in the understanding of these four things, which alchemy has reduced to three: the absolute, the fixed, and the volatile, referred by the Kabbalah to the essential idea of God, who is absolute reason, necessity, and liberty, a threefold notion expressed in the occult books of the Hebrews, under the names of Bina for the divine world, of Tifereth, Chesed, and Geburah in the moral world, and of Jesod, Hod, and Netzah in the physical world, which, together with the moral, is contained in the idea of the kingdom or Malkuth. We shall explain in the 10th chapter this theogony as rational as it is sublime. Now, created spirits, being called to emancipation by trial, are placed from their birth between these four forces, two positive and two negative, and have it in their power to affirm or deny good, to choose life or death. To discover the fixed point, that is, the moral center of the cross, is the first problem which is given them to resolve. Their initial conquest must be that of their own liberty. They begin by being drawn, some to the north, others to the south, some to the right, others to the left, and in so far as they are not free, they cannot have the use of reason, nor can they take flesh otherwise than in animal forms. These unemancipated spirits, slaves of the four elements, are those which the Kabbalists call elementary daimons, and they people the elements which correspond to their state of servitude. Sylphs, undines, gnomes, and salamanders really exist, therefore, some wandering and seeking incarnation, others incarnate and living on this earth. These are vicious and imperfect men. We shall return to this subject in the 15th chapter, which treats of enchantments and demons. That is also an occult tradition by which the ancients were led to admit the existence of four ages in the world, only it was not made known to the vulgar that these ages are successive and are renewed, like the 4 seasons of the year. Thus the golden age has passed, and it is yet to come. This, however, belongs to the spirit of prophecy, and we shall speak of it in the 9th chapter, which is concerned with the initiate and the seer. If we now add the idea of unity to the tetrad, we shall have, together and separately, the conceptions of the divine synthesis and analysis, the God of the initiates and that of the profane. Here the doctrine becomes more popular as it passes from the domain of the abstract. The grand hierophant intervenes. The pentagram.